Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Riya Gandhi and in today's video, we are going to discuss three of the most important and frequently asked Victorian authors in UGC NET English exam. In this video, we are going to first begin our discussion with a quick overview of Victorian Age, followed by these three important authors. Stay tuned till the end of this video because then we are also going to discuss the previous year questions related to these authors. First, let us understand what is Victorian Age. It is called as the Victorian Age because it actually coincides with the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901. What are the characteristics of the Victorian Age? It is marked by rapid industrialization. That is why this age is also called as the Age of Industrialization or the Age of Social Reform. Because of this rapid industrialization, the people from the rural areas, they flocked to the urban areas. This led to increase in unemployment as well as overcrowded slums that led to unhygienic conditions. And all of this led to the rise and emergence of an industrial novel. Now, what is an industrial novel? Industrial novels are basically the kind of novels that address the plight of the working class section of the society. They address the voices of the factory workers and talk about what they are going through in their lives. And let's not forget, this was also the time that Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859. This particular book divided the English society into two factions. The first faction were the section of society that believed in science, reason, rationality, and empiricism. And in the other faction of the society, they believed in God, they believed in faith. And that is why you also have the traditionalist Matthew Arnold, who wrote in one of his most famous poems, Dover Beach, that the sea of faith was once too full, the round earth's shore. And this was the age where there was the rise of the three-decker novels. Now, what are the three-decker novels? So basically, this is a novel that you read and all the chapters are present in this one novel. But three-decker novels were basically those kind of novels in which the first 10 chapters would be published in one installment. Then there will be a breathing period followed by another 10 chapters, again a breathing period and followed by the next 10 chapters. This is a basic and a brief overview of the Victorian Age. Now that you have a basic understanding of the Victorian Age, let's understand who are the three of the most important Victorian authors from UGC NET point of view. The first author that we are going to discuss is Charles Dickens. Now, not a lot of people know this, but Charles Dickens was called as a man of the streets. Why? Because he loved to walk. In fact, before turning his A Christmas Carol, he walked 15 to 20 miles around London during the autumn nights of 1843. Not only that, but while growing up, he relished the theatre and he even thought about becoming an actor himself. But then, acting was not considered to be a very gentlemanly profession. That is why he opted to being a reporter. And his early adulthood life was as a reporter. It was finally in 1836 that he published his The Sketches of Bose, which is his first literary output. Now you must be thinking that who is Bose? Bose was actually the nickname of his younger brother. He adopted it to be the pen name and called it as the Inimitable Bose and therefore published the Sketches of Bose. The Sketches of Bose are nothing but fanciful descriptive sketches with illustrations by the famous cartoonist George Cruikshank. His next important work is David Copperfield. So as you can see, it is not published in just one particular year. It is published from 1849 to 1850. Why? Because Charles Dickens was one of the most prominent practitioners of the three-decker novels. Now, when we are talking about David Copperfield, it is considered to be one of the most important and partly autobiographical Bildungsroman novel. It focuses upon Copperfield's childhood, with some of the most important characters coming in and out of his life like Micawber and Betsy Trotwood. But David Copperfield has provided English literature one of the most unforgettable villains called as Uriah Heep. Now, if you want to remember that David Copperfield is the most autobiographical novel of Charles Dickens, you can just look at the initials of the title. You have Charles Dickens, CD, David Copperfield, DC. Now, moving on to this third most important novel, and that is The Mystery of Edwin Drood. This novel is literally a mystery. Why? Because first of all, it was published posthumously in 1870. It is an unfinished novel. It is his only true mystery story. And it ends, or it is incomplete, at such a point where we really don't know what happened to the character. The character is Edwin Drood, an orphan, and the mystery is basically related to his disappearance. The second most important Victorian author that we are going to discuss in this video is George Eliot. Now we know that her real name is Mary Ann Evans. But why did she choose George Eliot to be her pen name? One of the very popular reasons is that there was a lot of Victorian misogyny, which did not allow women writers to be as popular as their male writers. But there is also a second reason, and that is that she chose this particular pen name because she wanted to separate her novels from her scandalous life. Yes, George Eliot led a very controversial and an infamous life. Why? Because she was infamous for her controversial love affairs. First of all, she was a left-wing radical, because of which a lot of people found her to be too opinionated and got intimidated by her. So she tried to erase her identity as a woman by adopting this particular name. But why George Eliot? I mean, she could have chosen any other name, right? She chose George because it was her long-term partner Louise's first name, and Eliot because it was a good, mouth-filling, easily pronounced word. When you're talking about her works, they are largely preoccupied with social history. And to capture that, she would bank upon the accents of her characters, where you will find that either one of her major characters, they will have a very strong regional accent. Moving on to her works, one of her most important work is The Mill on the Floss, which was published in 1860. It is also very autobiographical. It basically focuses upon the strained relations between Maggie and Tom, which again is inspired from her own relations with her brother Isaac. It is set in St. Ogg's in English Midlands, and the setting, the time, is from 1829 to 1839. Moving on to her next novel, she is also very popular for Daniel Deronda, that was published in 1876. Now I chose Daniel Deronda here because George Eliot, by publishing this work, proved that she was way ahead of her time. Why? Because in this novel, she has portrayed a very positive representation of Jewish people. She called out anti-Semitism. And that's why she believed that the English people are very bigoted and narrow-minded. And with this novel, she hoped to rouse the imagination of her readers to a vision of human claims in those races of their fellow men. Moving on to the third and the most important Victorian author, we have Thomas Hardy. Not a lot of people know this, but Hardy did not attend school until he was 8. In fact, he even dropped out of school after 16. During all this time, he spent a very lovely childhood in a beautiful countryside. and this countryside inspired him to create the fictional town Wessex in almost all of his novels. When you read his novels, you will realize that Wessex acquires a character of its own. He was in fact trained to be an architect and he practiced his profession until a certain period of time. But then, when he published Far from the Madding Crowd in 1874, he became one of the most famous authors of Victorian Age. Now the title Far from the Madding Crowd is borrowed from one of the most famous elegies in English literature. Guys, comment down the name of this particular elegy in the comment section below. Did you know that Thomas Hardy also invented or coined the concept of cliffhanger in his novel A Pair of Blue Eyes that was published in 1873. Since Hardy focused a lot upon the fictional town of Wessex, he is also called as a regional novelist. One of his most important works is Jude the Obscure. That was published in 1895 and it is also considered to be his last completed novel. It was very controversial during his time. Why? Because the time in which Hardy wrote and published this novel, it was the time of literature, Victorian literature, that was of high moral purpose. It believed adhering to the rules and the regulations of the society, because of which they believed that marriage is a very sacrosanct institution, which led to the repression and injustices against women. And he wanted to criticize it. He criticized it by a more sexually frank characters in this particular novel. He also created a Christminster town which is based on Oxford. In fact, when Jude the Obscure was published, it was so controversial that it was not openly sold in the markets. It was sold in brown paper bags among the public. Now that we have a basic understanding of who these important Victorian authors are, let's understand that why they are important from UGC NET point of view. If you look at the previous year question papers, you will realize that questions related to these authors are frequently asked. Questions like the office of circumlocution occurs in. Now, if you look at the options given below, you will definitely realize that this question is specifically related to Charles Dickens. And the answer is Little Dorrit. In this video, we only discussed David Copperfield and the mystery of Edwin Drood. When you are preparing for your UGC NET English exam, you should also look at other works of Charles Dickens like Little Dorrit, Bleak House, Great Expectations, Hard Times, The Pickwick Papers, which is considered to be his first novel. And while you are learning these works, you should make a list for yourself of the important characters within these novels. Because if you look at the question papers, you will realize that most of the questions related to Charles Dickens are asking the characters, about his characters, something about his characters. Now, moving on to the next question, which is, which character in Dickens keeps on hoping that something will turn up? The answer is Micawber, who appears in David Copperfield. Now, Micawber is a very optimistic person. He has gone through a lot of financial difficulties in his life. In fact, I believe he was even in the debtor's prison. But despite all of these difficulties, he continues to see the light at the end of the tunnel, which makes this to be a very eccentric characteristic of this particular character. So make sure that while you're creating this list of the important novels of Charles Dickens with the important characters, you also make another column beside that and talking about their eccentric characteristics. Moving on to the next question, which is, which novel of George Eliot was read with pleasure by Queen Victoria and also commissioned for 2 paintings of scenes as a mark of recognition? The answer is Adam Bede. In this video, we discussed The Mill on the Floss and Daniel Deronda. But the most important is also Adam Bede. Why? Because of this very specific reason, that Queen Victoria was so impressed by Adam Bede that after completing her reading, she commissioned for 2 paintings of the scenes as a mark of recognition. Moving on to the last question that was asked in one of the previous year question papers, and that was Thomas Hardy's last major novel was. I'm not going to answer this question, guys. I'm going to leave it up to you because we just discussed this in this video. So make sure that you type out the right answer in the comment section below.
These were three of the most important Victorian authors that are frequently asked in UGC NET English exam. Apart from these three Victorian authors, there are also other Victorian writers, critics, and poets who are frequently asked, like Matthew Arnold, Alfred Lord Tennyson, Bronte sisters, and more. Now, if you want to have a detailed understanding of these writers and master Victorian age for your UGC NET English exam in January, don't worry, I've got you covered. I am taking live UGC NET English exam preparation classes in which I'm sharing certain essential tips and strategies which help me crack UGC NET English exam in just first attempt. Not only that, but I'm also covering every important author, writer, poet of every age related to British English literature and Indian English literature in a very detailed and simplified manner. I'm also breaking down every complex concept and work related to literary criticism, which will provide you the confidence to ace this exam. Since these are live one-on-one classes, I can provide you the personalized guidance tailored to your needs and requirements, trying to fill the possible gaps in your UGC NET English exam preparation. If you want to know more about the courses I offer, the sessions I take, and the notes I provide, feel free to check out my TopMate page. It's topmate.io/Riya Gandhi. I've shared the link in the description box below, so don't forget to check it out. That's it for today's video lecture series. If you found this video lecture series informative and helpful, please like it and share it with other UGC NET English aspirants. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any videos that I will be uploading on such important topics and concepts in an engaging manner in the future. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you in the next one.